Starship debuts a new upgrade and splashes down in the Indian Ocean. We get up close and personal with ESA's Plato Space Telescope. Vast is about to build more satellites, and India is looking for a company to take over one of its rockets. As always, we've got all that and more coming up this week in Spaceflight. Well, it finally happened. Starship Flight 12. Let's go to Ryan for all the details.
Thanks, Alicia. Starship version 3 flew for the very first time this week. It was a mission of first that definitely went better than some previous Starship version debuts, but it still missed certain key milestones. Let's get to the details. After a smooth countdown and propellant load sequence, the clock paused at the T-40 second hold point for a few seconds to finish off propellant pushbacks before resuming. This led to a liftoff of Booster 19 and Ship 39 on May 22nd at 22:30 UTC from Pad 2 at the Starbase launch site in South Texas. Carrying hundreds of upgrades from improved and simplified engines to increased propellant capacity and including new technology for Starship's future, this flight intended to show that, despite the changes, Starship can still do at minimum what previous flights were able to achieve. Booster 19 managed to light up all 33 of its brand new Raptor 3 engines at liftoff, with one of those shutting down almost 2/3 of the way through ascent. The booster successfully shut down 27 of its engines, with 5 remaining on for hot staging, a new change introduced with version 3. Hot staging was successful, with the ship igniting its 6 engines and separating from the booster as expected. The booster was then supposed to flip and immediately start all of the other engines for a boostback burn. However, during engine startup, a few engines failed to relight, and an energetic burst was seen on the camera feeds that suggests a potential Raptor explosion taking out neighbouring engines. The booster then aborted its planned boostback burn and continued along with its current trajectory over the Gulf. Despite engines going out and a roll that it couldn't control at first, the booster successfully managed to control its entry once it was through the thickest parts of the atmosphere and the grid fins attained aerodynamic control of the vehicle. Even with the crazy flight it had gone through by that point, the booster still attempted to relight its engines for a landing burn, but that relight also failed and the booster unfortunately impacted the water at high speed. That being said, the views were quite good. While the booster was going through all of that, the ship continued with its ascent burn. The vehicle had lost one of its Raptor vacuum engines early on and had to prolong its ascent burn to compensate. Because of this, the ship did not enter what SpaceX would have called a nominal orbital insertion, and therefore no such call came up on the communication nets, but it still managed to achieve a good enough suborbital trajectory to complete its other objectives for this flight. Following ship engine cutoff, the vehicle successfully reoriented itself using the completely reworked reaction control system vents and prepared for payload deployment. For this flight, SpaceX had loaded 20 Starlink V3 simulators and 2 modified Starlink V2 mini satellites fitted with cameras and lights that would image Ship 39's heat shield during the coast phase. This would help engineers develop techniques in the future to identify the health of a ship's heat shield before it deorbits and returns for a catch at Starbase. I'm sure the people of Mexico wouldn't be happy with a ship breaking up all over their territory. For this imaging, the ship used its thrusters to rotate itself so that the satellites could see the heat shield, and also moved the flaps a few times so that the satellites could also image all of their different edges. According to SpaceX, these satellites were also fitted with various pieces of hardware set to fly in the next generation of Starlink satellites, Starlink version 3. For this flight, everything was version 3. After the payload deployment was wrapped up, Ship 39 was meant to test out a relight of Raptor 3 in space, but due to the engine out during ascent, SpaceX decided to wave it off and not perform that test. But as they tend to say in aviation, takeoffs are optional, landings are mandatory, and so Ship 39 was already on its way to hit re-entry not long after. The vehicle reoriented itself for re-entry and not only survived, but it also successfully maneuvered itself to the planned splashdown site, all despite the engine out during ascent and the deletion of the relight test. The ship also successfully performed a stress test of its aft aerodynamic flaps and carried out the banking maneuver that would be needed in the future to bring it back to Starbase for a catch. Ship 39 then successfully relit 2 of its 3 center engines and splashed down in the Indian Ocean about 1 hour and 6 minutes after liftoff, bringing Starship Flight 12 to an end. It is clear that while there are a few things that will need fixing and tweaking for the next flight, this was a largely successful flight. Unlike the debut of Starship version 1 or Starship version 2, the gap between this and a 100% successful flight is much smaller, and it could be bridged much more easily for the next flight. Of course, there were many other snippets of information and details about this flight worth analysing, but we have to get on with some other news of the week. For more on those details and analysis, don't forget to check out our next Starship Update episode, where we'll also take a look at the post-launch condition of the pad and what's next for the Starship program. Alicia, back to you.
This week, the European Space Agency showed off its upcoming Plato Space Telescope. Our writer Marty went to find out what this new spacecraft will be getting up to during its mission.
I'm at the European Space Agency Center in the Dutch town of Noordwijk. The center has become home for ESA's Plato telescope since September of last year. It's currently being tested here, and recently the spacecraft emerged from the thermal vacuum chamber to make sure it's ready for prime time. I just got an opportunity to admire the telescope up close in the clean room here at STEC and speak to some of the people involved with the program to get to know all the nitty-gritty detail of what this science powerhouse will be up to when it's in space.
After main contractor OHB completed the spacecraft, Plato was shipped to the Netherlands by boat via the River Rhine. It arrived at STEC on September 1st of last year and has since been subjected to all sorts of tests to verify its readiness for space. Most recently, teams tested the deployment of Plato's 2 fold-out solar wings, one at a time. In fact, when we got a look at the spacecraft, one of the wings was still out in its deployed position. So far, everything has been going well, and the entire project is still on schedule with the plan that was set in motion back in 2017. But that doesn't mean everything has gone perfectly smoothly, of course.
End of 24, when we were starting to integrate the cameras on the optical bench, we found one thing on a heater of a camera where we thought, oh, we need to look into this a bit more. But it means when you look into this, you have to look into 26 cameras or 24 plus 2 cameras. And this always, of course, is a challenge. But we found a quick solution. It took us a while to implement it, but also there we did some additional testing and so on camera level. We could prove that what we were doing is absolutely correct. Then we implemented it, and then we could put all the cameras onto the spacecraft. But of course, there is always then an impact that you need to try to recover later on in the project.
Hold on, 26 cameras? What does a space telescope need so many cameras for? Well, 24 of them are arranged in groups of 6, pointing in slightly different directions, 9.2 degrees away from each other. This allows Plato to have an incredibly large field of view. In fact, it can see an area of the sky the size of 10,000 full moons all at once. At the same time, the cameras overlap, boosting the telescope's sensitivity.
Actually, we have indeed 24 cameras that are the ones that we are superposing to get the best signal-to-noise ratios for the stars that we are observing. But we also have what we call 2 fast cameras. That's why we say 26 instead of 24, because these 2 fast cameras are used both for the fine guidance sensors, so then in order to be able to point with these incredible precisions that we talked about with Plato, and also for science, because then they will be used to observe very bright stars, and each camera has a color, so we will be able to compare for these very bright stars, the light goes in different colors. So then that's why these 2 cameras have a specific function.
All of these cameras will stare at the same part of the sky for the majority of Plato's mission, with its main objective being the search for exoplanets. It does so by studying what happens when a planet passes in front of its star from Plato's perspective, which is called a transit. During this event, the starlight dims slightly as some of it is blocked by the planet. The way the signal changes can tell scientists a lot about the planet.
The idea is the following. When we are looking for Earth-like planets around Sun-like stars, so the orbit of the Earth around the Sun is 1 year. So if you catch a transit, this is what we want to catch, then you want to make sure you also catch a second one. Because a first one, you think, yeah, it should be a transit, but is it really one? And then you need a confirmation. So if you go a little bit more than 2 years, because the distance can vary a bit, so it can be a bit longer than a year and so on, then you could say, yes, we really found a transit and this is what we are looking for.
Plato will study these exoplanets with unmatched precision. Its pointing is so stable that it could keep a laser pointed at a single grain of sand from a kilometer away for 3 months. This precision also makes the spacecraft uniquely suitable to study another phenomenon, oscillating stars. It turns out that acoustic waves travel through stars, much like earthquakes travel through our own planet. But as these waves bounce around the star, they turn into standing waves, resulting in the whole star wobbling at its own rhythm. The study of this phenomenon is called astroseismology.
For example, for a star like the Sun, the period of oscillation is 5 minutes. For the stars like red giants that are much bigger, their period of oscillations can be days or even months, then it's very much longer. So then that's why the measurement of how stars oscillate tell us about how sound waves propagate inside the star. There are other types of waves, but for sun-like stars, sound waves are the main ones. And then obviously, as sound travels differently depending on the density of the medium, it means that we can know very well what is the structure inside the star in order that can reproduce the oscillations we see. And then you can see, for example, if a star has, it's like the Sun, and then, as you know, so then it's having fusion of hydrogen into helium. So then you can see indeed how big this nucleus has become, and then how, the progress in the mean sequence of the star. And that's why we can calculate very well with the models and with the Sun as calibrator, the size of the star, the mass of the star, and the age of the star.
Plato is the first space telescope to systematically study this phenomenon. So when can we see it in action? Plato is set to launch in early 2027 atop an Ariane 6 with 2 solid rocket boosters. The rocket will deliver the telescope to the Sun-Earth Lagrange point 2, 1.5 million kilometers from Earth. But Plato isn't ready for its journey there just yet.
We still have to do the EMC testing, which is the electromagnetic compatibility testing, which will be at the beginning mid-June. And after this, in principle, we have done all the major tests that we have done. Still, we will improve, for example, on the software side, we will improve functionality and so on. We will finish putting everything together on the satellite. You have seen today there is still some MLI that is not finally fixed and so on. So we have to put it all back because we had to take off some test sensors and so on. This is now completely normal. And then we have to prepare it for shipment. And we ship it then to Kourou. In Kourou, we will put it into the clean room, completely test the satellite once again, not mechanically and so on, but functionally, to just show that everything is still fine. We will do some alignment measurements and so on. Then it comes the encapsulation onto the upper stage and with the fairing and so on, and then combined operations with the launcher together, and off we go.
We can't wait to see this telescope finally launch. And if you want to follow along as Plato gets ready for action, keep tuning into the show. Subscribe to our channel to get notified when new episodes go up. And why not give this one a like too? Now we'll take a look at some other stories across space, starting with space station company VAST, which is diversifying its business. Besides the Haven series of space stations that they're working on, they're also now offering a satellite platform that could be adopted for many different orbital needs. The spacecraft reuses many of the components and technologies that VAST developed for its future Haven 1 station and the Haven demo mission, which deorbited earlier this year after completing its highly successful test mission. But instead of supporting a space station, VAST Satellite Bus brings all of these components together to host whatever payloads customers want to bolt to the satellites, as long as its mass fits within the rated payload capacity of 350 kilograms. The 2 massive rollout solar arrays provide the spacecraft with 15 kilowatts of power, which, in addition to powering the payload, also enables some onboard computing capabilities. The spacecraft is designed to last for 5 years in orbit, during which it'll maintain its trajectory with VAST's own electric thrusters running on Krypton. But who would be using such a satellite platform? Well, VAST envisions it to support all types of missions like Earth observation, orbital data centers, communication, or national security missions. For now, they'll stick to low Earth orbit, but in the future, they'll add support for higher orbits or even lunar orbit. The satellites also seem particularly suitable for constellations, as they can be stacked for launch, much like SpaceX does with Starlinks. VAST has already signed 1 confidential customer who will buy 4 satellites with an option to purchase up to 200. The first batch of 10 VAST satellites is set to go up in late 2027. The Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, might be getting rid of its PSLV rocket, and the timing is slightly suspicious. So what's going on here? Well, this week ISRO announced that it's looking for a private company that wants to take over technology and operations to commercialize the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, or PSLV for short. Standing 44 meters tall, the expendable medium lift launcher uses 4 stages to carry its payloads to orbit. It starts off with a solid propellant first stage, flanked by a number of SRBs, depending on the particular variant. Then there's a liquid propellant-powered second stage, a solid third stage, and another liquid fourth. PSLV first flew on September 20th, 1993. Since then, across 5 configurations, it's accumulated a total of 64 flights, delivering payloads to polar orbits for customers all around the world. But recently, the rocket's reputation has gotten a bit tarnished. A year ago, the rocket failed to deliver its payload into orbit following a problem during third stage flight. After an investigation, PSLV returned to flight in January and failed again in a very similar manner, so the rocket hasn't flown again since. These back-to-back failures certainly raise some eyebrows, especially since PSLV is a veteran rocket. So it's all the more interesting that ISRO chose this moment to start searching for a private company to take over the launcher's production and operations. Last week, we reported on NASA's Psyche mission flying by Mars, and it has since sent home some pictures. On May 15th, the spacecraft passed above the planet's surface at a distance of roughly 4,600 kilometers. This maneuver through Mars's gravitational field accelerated Psyche by about 1,000 miles per hour, and more importantly, tilted the spacecraft's orbit by about 1 degree relative to the Sun. This put the Explorer on course for its meetup with its destination asteroid, named 16 Psyche, in summer of 2029. But the spacecraft used its Mars excursion for more than just changing its orbit. NASA teams took the opportunity to test and calibrate Psyche's cameras, and thus the craft sent home thousands of pictures. It wasn't just Psyche, though. To help with the collaboration process, the Red Planet's army of robotic explorers also chipped in. During the flyby, the Curiosity rover pointed its cameras up to take atmospheric observations. Perseverance also assisted, as well as Martian satellites from NASA and the European Space Agency. All these observations combined will help the team to validate Psyche's instruments. With this important milestone now complete, Psyche and its team are now ready to spring into action once the mission arrives at its destination in a few years. Isar Aerospace partnered with a naval defense company to build launch infrastructure in Canada? Okay, what? So the German company TKMS announced a partnership with German rocket builder Isar this week, and normally TKMS builds submarines and other naval vessels, but it now wants to expand its operations into space. Meanwhile, Isar is still working to get the second flight of its Spectrum rocket off the ground from its Norwegian spaceport, but the experience of building these launch facilities might come in handy for the collaboration with TKMS. Why Canada? Well, TKMS is working on a bid to build submarines for the Royal Canadian Navy, and to make the bid more appealing, they want to throw space launch capabilities into the mix. Now, we don't know for sure where the launch infrastructure is supposed to go, although the project is said to create jobs in Nova Scotia, which is already home to a spaceport project. In March, South Korean launch company Innospace signed an agreement to work towards launching from there as well. Coincidentally, South Korea's Hanwha Ocean is competing with TKMS for the submarine contract. Whatever is going on, we can't really complain though if it leads to more rocket launches around the world. The exploration company completed vibration testing for its Nix cargo spacecraft. Earlier this year, we saw several components coming together for the capsule's full-scale structural test model. Just 3 months ago, the company took delivery of Nix's pressure vessel, and since then they've already integrated it with other components, done pressure testing, and now also completed a 4-week vibration test campaign at ESA's S-Tech facility, where Plato is also being tested. During those 4 weeks, they performed 69 tests on ESA's hydraulic multi-axis shaker called Hydra. It's an octagonal table 5.5 meters across, which can shake up to 23 metric tons to simulate vibrations that a spacecraft might experience during launch. Meanwhile, the exploration company also performed thermal vacuum testing of an engineering model of Nix's tanks. Another recent test demonstrated the mechanism for separating Nix from its service module ahead of deorbit. Nix is set to perform an ISS resupply mission in a few years, and with all of these tests, the company is clearly moving at speed to make it happen. It's exciting to see European companies working on this capability, but we can't wait to get our eyes on the first flight hardware. And now to Ryan for some late-breaking news.
Thanks, Alicia. Blue Origin's New Glenn has been cleared to return to flight. The company announced on Friday that the Federal Aviation Administration had received their report and closed out the investigation into the failure of the second stage from the vehicle's third flight. According to the FAA, quote, the final mishap report identified the direct cause of the mishap as a cryogenic leak that froze a hydraulic line and led to a thrust anomaly during the second stage engine burn. In case you don't remember, New Glenn Flight 3 was carrying AST SpaceMobile's Bluebird 7 satellite into low Earth orbit. While the first stage was successful on its ascent, landing and recovery, the second stage did not perform one of its 2 expected burns to insert Bluebird 7 into the target orbit. With this report now closed off, New Glenn is cleared to fly again, and Blue Origin is already preparing for the next launch. The company has assembled the rocket for that mission using a brand new first stage called No, It's Necessary, and it has now been placed onto the rocket's transporter erector. According to Dave Limp, the next step is to perform the integrated hot fire test of the rocket on the pad prior to launch. While not confirmed yet, the launch is expected to carry the first batch of Amazon LEO satellites on board New Glenn, and given the launch preparations, it could occur really soon. The development path to a rocket's first flight is never a straight line. Sometimes it's a squiggly line, like the one forming this crack. This fracture, located on a Neutron interstage test article, was imaged by NSF's Patrick O'Loughlin at the Rocket Lab Space Structures Complex in Middle River, Maryland. The interstage had been seen placed on this test stand for the first time just over a month ago on April 20th. Since then, it had been fitted with a load cap and had undergone a series of load tests to qualify it for flight. In Rocket Lab's latest earnings call earlier this month, company officials had explained that this was intended to later be fitted with a full suite of avionics and fluid systems and integrated with Neutron's Hungry Hippo fairing that had been shipped to Wallops ahead of the rocket's first flight. So it's not a great sign if it eventually broke during testing. In a reply to Pat on social media, Rocket Lab stated that the interstage had achieved qualification load, but ultimately tested to failure. As mentioned before, and as confirmed by the company in that post, this was not a planned outcome. But Rocket Lab also says that it wasn't completely unexpected. The company states in the post that the next interstage is already in the factory, so be assured here at NSF we'll keep an eye on when the next one may come out for testing and hope that all goes well for Neutron's development. Those rockets aren't currently flying, but these ones are. It's your space traffic report, powered by NASASpaceflight. Right on the heels of last week's episode, this week's traffic report begins with the launch of the CRS-34 Dragon mission to the International Space Station. For this mission, Dragon was carrying about 3 metric tons of supplies to the orbiting outpost and will remain docked for about a month. Apart from Starship, which we covered earlier in the episode, SpaceX launched 2 more Falcon 9 rockets on 2 Starlink missions, one taking place from Vandenberg, the other from Florida. This week, Rocket Lab launched the 7th orbital Electron rocket of the year on a mission called Viva la Strix, which carried a Strix satellite from Earth imaging satellite company Synspective. From China, we also had the launch of the 9th batch of Tianfen internet satellites on board a Changzheng 8 rocket. We also had a rare China and European partnership mission launching this week. The Solar Wind Magnetosphere Ionosphere Link Explorer, also known as SMILE, launched on an Italian Vega C rocket from the Guiana Space Center. SMILE is the result of a collaboration between the European Space Agency and the Chinese Academy of Sciences to study and image the Earth's magnetosphere in high detail, especially its interaction with the solar wind. Going into next week, we'll have more launches from China, including the next crew Shenzhou launch to the Tiangong space station, carrying a new crew of 3 to replace the trio already living on board the station. From the United States, we're expecting potentially up to 3 Starlink launches from SpaceX and the penultimate launch of Amazon LEO satellites on ULA's Atlas V rocket. With the ever-changing schedules, we always recommend you go to nextspaceflight.com or download the NextSpaceflight app on your phone to be up to date on when launches might occur. Alicia, back to you.
And that's your weekly update of spaceflight news. I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and we'll see you all again next week to recap this week in spaceflight.